Wedged between the forests and the ocean, home to Grouse and Seymour Mountain and the Capilano River, it's hard to find a more beautiful urban setting than the district of North Vancouver. However, there is one part that is not so attractive, and that is the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant. Now, that was originally estimated to cost $700 million, but the price had ballooned to $3.86 billion in 2024. Eventually, it'll serve over 300,000 residents and businesses that are not just in the district. But the North Vancouver residents are the ones that are paying the lion's share, and they're not happy about it. So we're sitting down with the mayor of the district, Mike Little, to hear how he's addressing the issue. Mayor Mike Little, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So how was the year 2025 for you and the district of North Vancouver?
Well, it was a very busy time for our community. We obviously had some challenges at the tail end of last year with some of the atmospheric river issues that sort of set the tone for the start of the year. As we had to assess those challenges and make improvements to our water systems in and around the Deep Cove area. Sort of set the tone for the beginning of the year, but throughout the course of the year, it's been a great year on the North Shore.
All right, Mayor, I do want to talk a little bit about the North Shore Wastewater Plant and the controversy around it. The controversy really being around the ballooning cost of this project. The original construction company, Acciona Wastewater Solutions, is suing Metro Vancouver for over $250 million. It's alleging wrongful termination of their contract in January 2022. Metro Vancouver filed a counterclaim for over $1 billion in damages, alleging Acciona breached the contract, missed deadlines, and requested an almost double budget increase. Now, recently, BC's Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs had rejected a request from a group of citizens in the North Shore, and they were calling for a public inquiry into this ballooning cost of the project. So how does the district plan to address these concerns following this decision from the BC Ministry?
Our council was very supportive of that. In fact, we passed a motion unanimously asking for a public inquiry into the situation with the wastewater treatment plant. The challenge has been that initially the province was relying on Metro Vancouver to do that kind of review, and they said that if they weren't satisfied with it, they'd take further action. Now that Metro Vancouver's decided that they're not going to continue with that review, they're instead just focusing on the legal case. Nobody's filled in to pick up the loss, and so we're left in a challenging spot. We think that the court case is probably likely to end up in some kind of settlement, which means we won't have all of the benefits of a court case where you're comparing facts from the different parties and actually determining what happened. And so I still think that a public inquiry is going to be the only way that we actually find out what led to the ballooning costs of this project.
And what do we know at this stage about the impact of this cost associated with the North Shore Wastewater Plant on residents? What would that look like?
Well, they've already started to feel it unloaded onto their utility bills starting last year, and this next year it'll be another about $120, $125 just from that portion of the utility alone, about $175 when you include all of the utility functions, including water and everything else. And so, yes, on the North Shore, we've gone from being the most expensive sub-area within the region to by far the most expensive sub-area within the region. We don't find it to be fair. We're not satisfied with the decisions that Metro Vancouver has made in this regard, and we're still fighting for North Shore residents to get a fair and equitable deal within the region. But we only hold about 8% of the voting power at Metro Vancouver, and so we're sort of dependent on sympathetic neighbors within the region to come and support our cause. And so far, we've only been able to get $10 per household from the regional partners, which equates to about $125 less for North Shore residents. It's not nothing. It's significant in terms of its effect on our much smaller sub-area. But what we had asked for was $40 per household per year from the rest of the region to help bring that down to a much more modest cost. So we'll still continue with those efforts to get the region to change the allocation model, but at this point, the North Shore is by far carrying the largest burden on that project, and it's not a normal project. It is an extraordinary cost. There's no other example in Metro Vancouver's history of a project going 7 times over budget. And so we think it should be treated differently as an extraordinary cost. And so far, they've been trying to fit it into the previous funding models, and I don't think that's going to work for this project.
And is there any possibility that this project could balloon further in cost as it continues to be built?
I think the largest pieces are fairly reliably contracted, but again, they were before too. So that's always the challenge. We were in a period of time where 3P projects were intended to limit the risk for the public. And so this one originally was design, build, finance, operate. So it was all four characteristics of a 3P. And the intent was that that was supposed to protect the public from risk. What ended up happening is they just walked away from the project. They laid off all of their staff and just said, we're not going to, unless you adjust the budget, we're not going to keep working on it. And so while at that time it was unforeseen that somebody would simply walk away from such a large project while they were still owed money for incomplete work, in this case it happened because the actual construction costs had far exceeded the risk to just walk away. And so the design, build, finance, operate didn't actually end up protecting the public from risk in this case.
Is there anything that the city can do, or rather the district can do, to soften the blow for residents when it comes to the wastewater treatment plant?
Again, anything we do is also vicariously being borne by our own residents. And so this last year we did use, and this year we've used a reserve fund to the tune of about $16 million to help bring down the household impact for our residents. But again, that money was collected from our residents for that purpose. So it was really about rate smoothing. It doesn't actually decrease the amount you contribute to the project entirely over time. We were able to get Metro Vancouver to scale it in over 5 years, so that's why it's still being onboarded rather than all in one big chunk. And we also were able to get Metro Vancouver to amortize it over 30 years rather than 15 years, which does have a significantly higher borrowing cost on it, but at the same time, instead of it being approximately $600 or $700 per household, it would have been over $1,100, $1,200 per household if we had done it on the 15-year amortization. And we just felt that that wasn't bearable within the community. So, plus also there's the philosophy there where do the existing residents today contribute the lion's share, or do you scale it out into the future because the plant is going to be there for 80 years, and so what should future residents be reasonably contributing to the construction of the plant? And so by extending the amortization out of it, yes, you have a more interest costs, but you also have a little bit more fairness that the people who happen to be residents here now are paying a reasonable portion versus future generations that would all of a sudden have no commitment to capital. So I think it's in that regard at least a little bit fair towards who's getting the benefit from the facility.
When we return, we're going to continue our conversation with Mayor Little to hear about the other water costs that are flowing out the pockets of district residents. We are back to talk to the District of North Vancouver's mayor about the heavy cost of living on the side of a mountain. And on top of the concerns around the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant, we also learned about wet weather pricing. It's something that Metro Vancouver has been phasing in since 2024. What impact would this have on the residents of the District of North Vancouver?
It's another frustrating aspect of our dealings with Metro Vancouver, and it is already onboarded into our rates. So we get penalized essentially for too much what they call I&I, which is ingress and infiltration. It's water that's going through broken pipes in your community into the storm and sanitary lines. And because of two main factors, one, we're a rainforest, we get an incredible amount of rain, double, triple the amount of rain that you get on the south side of the city. We have obviously a lot more potential for I&I into our system, but also we have a very mature forest, and so the root systems have been tearing up and bumping into these pipes for a long time to come. And so what we do is we have what's called a stormwater management plan to help slow down the release of rainwater from private property into our drainage system. And we also require homes, when they're doing major construction on their project, to replace their crosscut. And so that's the connection that's largely been impacted by trees between our infrastructure and an individual home's infrastructure. And the costs, they're not insignificant. It's sometimes $15,000 to $25,000 depending on how long and how deep it needs to be in that space. And so we require homes to upgrade that when they're doing a renovation. And it means that there will be less I&I coming into the system in general. We're frustrated that we're being penalized with the wet weather pricing into the system, while New Westminster and Vancouver have a combined sewer system where there's 4 times as much rainwater going in as there is actual sewage going into the system. And so we get surcharged, and they're given out until, I think, 2075 to be able to separate their systems. We don't find that to be fair. But there are other municipalities that are penalized in a similar way. Delta, as an example, has a very similar level of wet weather penalty to the District of North Vancouver. But again, we do see that we have a responsibility to make sure our infrastructure is built and maintained in working order. It's just a challenge on top of everything else.
In addition to building that infrastructure to address the concerns around this wet weather pricing, I'm sure that would also add costs to taxpayers. So what is the solution here? We're talking about increases for taxpayers when it comes to the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant, this wet weather pricing, and if we're trying to address wet weather pricing with infrastructure, more for taxpayers in the district of North Vancouver. So what is the real solution here from your perspective?
Well, at the 30,000-foot level, I think you're seeing it in all municipalities in some forms. And so a lot of our municipalities really benefited from land sale programs a generation ago that helped us build our infrastructure and maintain our infrastructure at that time. We don't generally do that. We're going for higher densification of existing already sold private property rather than selling more public property. And so the end result is you are reliant on taxes and utilities rather than land sales to be able to maintain that infrastructure. We found it also a lot in our recreation and library infrastructure, where a lot of these buildings were built around the centennial celebrations in 1967. There was a lot of federal dollars that was available to produce rec centers and rec facilities. So I have 3 rec facilities that were built in that time period with centennial dollars. Well, they're all now 50 to 75 years old. You know, they're getting up there in age, and so we're having to actually look at ways to replace that infrastructure without the benefit of major federal grants and land sales. And so it is a challenge for our community. There's no question they're beloved assets and people want them in the community. It's just figuring out how to pay for it. But even at a higher level, I do think that we need a white paper on how to pay for infrastructure across the province of BC. You're seeing the costs balloon on the new hospital, on the extension of the SkyTrain, and basically every fixed price contract that's come up since 2020 in the public sphere has been way over the original budgets. And so I do think we need to have a broader conversation about whether we have the correct taxation tools, revenue tools to be able to look after infrastructure in the long run.
After the break, CityNews Connect will talk to Mayor Little about the challenges of preventing flooding when an extraordinary weather event happens. We are talking with the District of North Vancouver's mayor about what he's able to do to prevent flooding when atmospheric rivers send water pouring down the mountain. I want to talk a little bit more about the flooding that we saw in Deep Cove back in 2024, and that caused a lot of infrastructure damage. And as you were saying, there was a lot of repairs done following that. What can you tell us about these repairs? Has the infrastructure been remediated? Have the concerns around the infrastructure been remediated? And can we prevent a repeat of something like that?
I got to tell you, as a municipality on the edge of the wilderness, we have a lot of overland creeks and potential flooding spaces, debris flow spaces in our community. We watch hazard risk very closely in our municipality. We had that creek that largely failed, the Gallant Creek area over Deep Cove. We had actually already done a significant upgrade in our infrastructure there. And so you say, well, then why didn't it work? Well, it did. Its job was to keep the debris out of the pipes, and it did that. The problem was there was so much debris that came down in such a short period of time that someone needed to be scooping it out of the catch basin at that time. And so we have advanced our emergency plans, so you're more likely to have a situation where we would have scouters on the creeks, that we would have pre-positioned equipment in order to be able to clear out strategic catch basins and drainage systems. But I have to say, we're all still reliant on the information we receive. And so if the predictive services under Environment Canada can't tell us what to expect, it's very hard for us to take extraordinary measures and put resources in place. On the October 19th atmospheric rain event last year, we had been told that we were going to be expecting about 150 to 200 millimeters of rain over the course of the weekend, which is a heavy rainstorm, but it's not an extraordinary winter rainstorm for us on the North Shore. In the end, we ended up at 350 millimeters of rain, which really is an extraordinary event. And so the quality of that information that you have as a predictive service, if they say it's going to be an extraordinary event, we'll take extraordinary measures. But otherwise, it's a big challenge for municipalities to take extraordinary actions when we're just guessing. We need good information to work on. And frankly, to roll up to that, it costs me about $15,000 to $20,000 every single time I roll it up, because I'm loading equipment onto trailers, driving it into position, dropping it off, getting it ready. And so every time we roll it up, it does cost us a fair amount of money. So we need better information from Environment Canada in order to be able to better respond to those cases.
Is there any more work that needs to be done when it comes to infrastructure and preventing flooding in the district of North Vancouver from your perspective?
Yes, absolutely. There's no question a combination of public and private property improvements need to happen in our community to better protect us. We have some work underway up on Kilmore Creek, which is one of the spaces that has had some flooding up in Lynn Valley. And we have a number of the headwater pieces that we've looked at to make sure that we have the right upland infrastructure to manage it. But again, I think the biggest vulnerability is pre-positioning equipment when we have a known risk in an area. Because, as I said, your catch basins and weirs can do a fine job, but if you aren't also clearing them out along the way with an extraordinary event, even with the right equipment in place, it'll still fail.
When City News Connect returns, we're going to ask Mayor Little about why he signed a letter to the provincial government, which was asking them to walk back housing mandates imposed on his district. The District of North Vancouver needs more homes, but Mayor Little does not believe having the province mandate new builds is the right solution. I want to talk a little bit about the high cost of living in North Vancouver housing. I understand you're one of 15 mayors who signed on to a letter asking the province to repeal Bills 44 and 47 regarding housing targets that the province has set for municipalities. Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly is being asked from cities and why you're asking to repeal these bills?
I don't think they'll do what they intended to do. So the initial discussion, a lot of the talking points that came out with Bill 44 when it was originally introduced, I believe it was in October of 23, was that it was going to be to help address affordability specifically. And to be clear, it was a supply side regulation. It didn't actually provide any additional funding for affordability in the community. It didn't provide any additional funds, in fact, arguably less funds for infrastructure development in the community because Bill 47 capped how much the municipalities could take out of the uplift of developments. And so in our view, it actually made it a lot harder for us to produce affordability in what we had been producing of deeply affordable subsidized units. What we used to do is we would take let's say there's 100 units in a new development. We would take 90 of the units, we'd sell them at market, and from each one we'd take $15,000, $20,000 from each one, and we'd put it together to make the other 10 units much more affordable. We're limited by Bill 47 in how much we can actually do that. It's a much smaller amount of money that we can transfer to produce affordability within a project. And so that's been a challenge for us. But the Bill 44 challenge is really about the dramatic change to our single-family neighborhoods without a source of funds to develop our infrastructure. And so what Bill 44 does is it makes it so that in every community, every single family neighborhood, you have to have 3 dwelling units per household. And so what that means is I now have to account for 3 dwellings worth of sewage, 3 dwellings worth of water coming into the system. I have to try to figure out a way to adjust transit services potentially for that density. And we just don't think it's a good way to do it. What we had been doing, so the planning community had come to us over the decades leading up to it and said, the right way to address your infrastructure challenges is to build town centers. You're going to get the critical mass for transit. You're going to be able to upgrade your trunk infrastructure underground in those areas through the redevelopment. It's the best way to address these challenges. And you can also provide services to those spaces through commercial and urban mixes that you would see. And so we started to pursue that. We started to craft 4 town centers. It was working. We were producing quite a number of units in there, probably relatively historic growth for the District of North Vancouver. And then the province comes along and says, well, actually, units everywhere. Well, units everywhere doesn't actually help us organize our services. It makes a car-centric neighborhood more car-centric without hitting the critical mass for transit development. And so we don't see it as being a step forward in those areas. I've had many conversations with the provincial representatives on that issue, and I remember speaking with the former, with Minister Ravi Kahlon, who was the former Minister of Housing in the province, and saying, look, if you had wanted us to be more aggressive about the completion targets and producing more units, we would have addressed that, but we would have done it in a planned way. We would have put it where we have infrastructure, where we can get the critical mass for transit. Instead, the approach is just units everywhere. And I just don't think that's a strategic way to address it. I think a planned community makes a lot more sense than just simply removing the guardrails and producing units wherever you want to.
Mayor Mike Little, thank you again for your time today.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
That's it for City News Connect. I'm Nima Rajan. Thanks for watching.